We're live. Hello and good evening, and welcome to the Morganton Planning and Zoning Commission meeting for May 2023. Tonight, we've got one item of new business to consider, but before that, we want to cover our old business. First item is review and approval of the lengthy April 11th minutes. We had those sent to us via email, and hopefully everyone in the commission has had an opportunity to review and read those. Any questions, comments, changes, deletions, etc.? Seeing none, I'll move that those are approved. Second item is a review of previous city council action since our last meeting. And Wendy, would you cover that real quickly for us?
Yes, so we sent the same changes that you guys proposed with the minor two amendments that Planning and Zoning Commission had proposed to City Council. Those changes were adopted in full by City Council at the May 1st council meeting, except for one item where we removed 3 words related to the proposed restriction on chain link fencing in the CBD. There were some questions there around dog parks and potential children's playgrounds and what that might do for cost, et cetera. And they just felt they weren't ready to vote on that piece later. They'd like to have more, they'd like to have more discussion on that for a later date. So we removed those 3 words that said, I think we'd added in except for CBD for that to be allowed. So chain link fencing on front fences in CBD is still allowed, but every other change they were happy to adopt.
Real fine. Questions for Wendy? Comments? Hearing none, we'll move along. This next item is appearances. And seeing that we have no one in our audience, what I would suggest, if you're out there on YouTube watching, or if you're on Channel 2 Compass and watching, please take in anything we have to say. And if you, in the future, do want to comment, we have an opportunity for you to come and address us in person. But seeing none in the audience tonight to do that, we're going to move on to new business. Prior to that, we want to bring up a new item which deals with conflicts of interest on anything in the future that we are discussing as business. And this will be an opportunity for anybody on the commission, if they are less than an arm's length away from an item discussion. Wendy, you want to add some comments to this?
It's a standard part of a lot of public hearings, public meetings, and it's been suggested to us as a wise idea from the UNC Council or School of Government, rather. And we will provide some more details to the Planning and Zoning Commission about what exactly would constitute a conflict of interest and how that process will run, but noting that tonight we did have an individual that was intending to declare a conflict of interest. It's a great place to bring that up here at the moment.
Okay, we'll invite his participation in our discussions, but when it comes time to vote, we hope that he would just abstain from that. Moving on, our first and only item tonight is consideration for an application that's submitted by Arley Incorporated to rezone approximately 8.04 acres of property located at 0 Sanford Drive. The property is currently zoned medium intensity district with a river district overlay, and our application is to rezone to high intensity district within the river district overlay. Wendy, would you give us the staff's evaluation of the project, please?
Yes, so the background to this is that the property is currently in zone MID, and Chad, if you could put that on the screen. So this is the location of the property. It's at the corner of Lenore Road or Highway 18 North or Highway 64, depending upon which map you're looking at, and Sanford Drive. So if you follow my cursor here, this area is Grace Heights. Grace Ridge.
Yep.
Grace Heights. This area is Kirksey Funeral Home, and then you have North Morganton United Methodist Church, and then the subject property is over here with the city's recreation properties. This is being developed there for the mountain bike course, and then this is part of Catawba Meadows Park over there, and the Catawba River is the blue strip behind it. So the property is currently zoned MID, which allows a range of businesses and different types of residential development. The proposal, with a river district overlay, because we can see it's on the river, the proposal is to rezone it to HID, which allows for a few different types of commercial businesses, but primarily higher intensity residential development. The future land use plan is what's on the map, on the screen at the moment from the comprehensive plan. It does show this area as recreation and open space on that map, due likely to the proximity to the river and the recreation parcels beside of it. It's probably highly unlikely that a private property owner is going to develop a space for recreational uses. The development, as we said, at Grace Ridge, directly across the street, and that, we note, is on the topographic rise as well, so it's the higher property than this property, is 6-story apartment facility there with the nursing facility and so forth, as well as the duplex developments behind it. Your neighbors at the funeral home, that is a 1-story development, but used sporadically, mainly in the evening, so not a lot of impact, we think, necessarily for that. The church, same basic type of use in there, though there is potentially some developable property to the rear here of there as well that may complement any changes in this property in the future. The proposal is not to make any changes to the river district overlay. That would still be a part of the zoning, but to allow those other uses. And your packet gives you a list in the report of what those different uses are and the availability of those. So that's kind of the surrounding development proposal. Clearly, it has access to 2 major roads. It's very likely that any development of this property would require a TIA from a traffic impact assessment from DOT, and that the requirement would be that it accesses off of Sanford Drive in that location because of the topography and the length of drive that you'd have there at the intersection. It has access to water and sewer, upgrades as always at the developer's expense. And as said, you've got not only a comparison of the uses, but of the difference in the density standards that would be allowed there should it be developed for residential uses. We do have to clarify that while the developer, who I understand is trying to make it here and is likely in traffic, is proposing multifamily uses, we do have to make clear that they could do anything that's permitted in that HID category. That being said, looking at the use of the site, they could do most of those things in MID. And the HID would, the increased density that would be allowed if it was multifamily, everyone, I think, it's not a secret that there is a need for additional housing in the area at the moment. So should that be the proposal, that or the other uses in HID are not seen as really having an effect on the neighbors because of the neighbors that we've just went through, which are our own properties and the other more community-based uses. So it is the staff's recommendation for the reasons noted there that you approve the rezoning to HID with River District Overlay, as it's unlikely to develop as recreational open space. Traffic impacts from future development can be mitigated. The development of the site with multi-story, multifamily uses or other non-residential commercial uses as allowed in HID would be considered in keeping with the surrounding development and the character of the surrounding uses. Should it be developed with housing, the additional density available in HID would fulfill a significant community need, and we are preserving that River District Overlay, which will provide some use and design regulations to limit the impact upon neighboring properties and the streetscape in that area. And should you choose to support it, there are specific requirements in our 160D statutes about how you have to address the comprehensive plan piece of that, which is why you're provided with proposed motion. If you don't use that motion, that's fine. We will develop other wording.
Any questions, comments? One thing I will comment, I've just gone through and looked at the River District Overlay, and it does not permit some uses that would be offensive, which I think is a good thing. Wondered if you could take a little time and go over the dimensional and density standards just for the viewing public, if you could.
Sure. The base density in MID is 2 dwelling units per acre. You would get an automatic density of 6 dwelling units per acre in HID. Now, the property is, get back to that page, about 8 acres in size. We're gonna doubt that anybody's developing it at base density for 14 dwelling units. That's probably not terribly profitable. So we are looking probably at the performance density standards. Now, the maximum residential density is what we're looking at there. Currently, it's 10. That would be doubled to 20, which is a difference in the tripling that you get under the base district. You can see there's some differences in the setbacks when you use the performance standards versus the base standards. Again, we'll look at performance standards, and really the only difference is the rear setback and the maximum height that you could reach there. Rear setback is going to be to the city's recreational properties, and the maximum height difference does go from 50 to 65 feet in those district changes. Again, the reason that the staff is supporting that is because the development across the street from that is already at that higher level for that. And again, it's on higher ground, so it's still going to appear as much higher level development from the street, which is generally where we take most of our planning perspective on those pieces.
So if I understand these charts, the maximum number of units for the 8 acre would be what?
If they got the maximum number of performance points,
Yep.
and they could, meaning they've done all these, what we call nice things under the performance standards, it'd be the 20 times 8, so 160.
Wow.
Now, you still have to fit all of those actually on the site, along with your parking requirements, along with your communal open space requirements, along with your setback requirements. So whether or not that's actually achievable at 160 would be up to some creative design work for that. We know, and we've had discussions with the developer that about what we see as selling in the markets these days. And we found that the 1-bedroom rentals, people are struggling to rent those. So you're probably not looking at the smallest units possible to be able to squeeze all of that in, because they want to be able to have a successful development as well. So, but if they were able to have a creative design and fit it in there, yes, it could be 160 units times that 0.04 bit at the end.
And the height requirement maximum could be up to what?
65.
65.
So 6 stories.
Awesome. Any other comments or questions?
Just note, they could do a combination of commercial and multifamily development. So you could end up with a development that had, say, shops on the ground floor and then apartments or things above that as well. That, as they could today under the MID zoning as well.
All to fit within the table of permitted uses.
Yes, sir.
Yep. Good deal.
I had a question. This might be outside of like the scope of what we're looking at, but is this, is there any concern with that being in the floodplain there, right next to the river, or how does that relate to this, if at all?
Anything that would, no, I don't think that it is. I'm not 100% sure.
It's
actually,
it's the very back left corner,
Yeah.
or the northwest corner is a hair in the
That
a
100.
little bit in the
Yeah.
corner.
Kind of, okay.
But even if it was in the floodplain or floodway, they'd be able to be developed under meeting the conditions of the flood damage prevention ordinance, which we call the floodplain ordinance.
Okay,
So as long as they met those standards and raised basically the mechanical equipment, and they had a way for water to flow through that corner, they would be able to develop it. But
various
again,
mitigation
a
strategies.
wise
Yeah,
developer is going to leave that as their open space portion of it
indeed. Okay,
as well.
great.
Just
Great,
curious.
Wendy, could you just briefly go over what difference the River District overlay changes to HID everywhere else in the world? What restrictions it puts on it?
Okay, so there are, if you look in the table of uses, the first big one is that there are some uses that are permitted So if we look at the last one, for example, outdoor storage, outdoor sales display, that's permitted on a retail use in HID, but not if you're in the corridor overlay or the river district overlay. So there are additional restrictions on uses. So you could do a warehouse in a mini warehouse in HID, but not in the river district overlay. And the intent of the standards around which uses are restricted is the same as the additional restrictions for the river district overlay, which relate to how it looks. And so there's going to be specific design requirements about the use of stone materials and those sorts of things in your building design requirements to create a certain look and feel when you're in the river district. Certain fencing types that are different there versus other districts.
Dressed up appearance overall.
Yes, sir. We want to highlight, my understanding is the intent of the River District was to highlight that as one of the most prized corridors in the city, and there's a bit more restrictions on what you can do there.
There would be no access to this property from 18, is that correct?
Both of those are DOT roads, so I can't promise that, but I would say it'd be extremely unlikely, both because of the topography of the site in that location and because of the proximity to the intersection. At the most, you might get a right out onto there. Right in, right out.
Excuse me, other questions or comments? Okay, moving on, I would open this to the public, but since we have no one here, as far as the public to comment, we'll close that. Bring it back for a further discussion or motion.
I'll make the motion. I propose we adopt the recommendation of staff for the city council to support the rezoning of 0 Stanford Drive from, was it medium,
MID to HID.
MID to HID,
Within the River District overlay.
within the River District, yes.
The overlay.
Do I have a second to that?
I'll second that.
I've got a second from Waits. Any further discussion? All right, I'll call for the vote, and Eric, you'll abstain, as we understand. All in favor, aye?
Aye.
Any opposed? That will go to city council. They don't meet in June, do they?
Yes, they meet twice in June, actually, and not in July.
Not in July.
So it should go to city council on the 5th of June,
And that's at
6 o'clock.
6 o'clock. Okay, 6 June, 6 o'clock. All right. Does anyone have any other items that they'd like to bring up for discussion tonight?
I just wanted to mention the comprehensive plan program, and that we are embarking on the beginning part of that process through the advisory committee meeting, the formal public engagement process through the advisory committee meeting on May 18th, and that the Planning and Zoning Commission will likely be invited to sort of we're targeting then the first week in June for a community-wide workshop for everyone to be involved, and it's likely that the P&Z will be invited for sort of a pre-community workshop meet and greet. So before that starts with that, and that will either be aligned with the meeting date that you would typically have in June, or possibly the day before to avoid conflicts with some other community events that we know that are occurring there. So June 7th or 8th, look out for invites, just half hour, 20 minutes before the other workshop to be able to come in and take a look at the consultant's materials and have a brief chat with them.
Now, is that open to the public, and if so, how will we learn about that?
So your pre-meet and greet would not be open to the public, but the community workshop would be open to the public, and that would be advertised starting next week. There'll be a project website that will be available all the time for anyone to engage with. There'll be advertisements on our social media page and other notifications to the public, likely in the local newspapers and so forth, to really, and we encourage all of you to connect with all of your contacts, all of your fellow citizens, and anybody really that uses Morganton in any way, and encourage them to come to these events because we want the widest range of input possible to those. And part of your role as Planning and Zoning Commission in that is to bring these meetings and stuff that are open to the public, like the community workshop, if there are online surveys or other types of events and things, to your networks, and encourage those people to be involved. Erin has a wide group of the industrial commons, of a range of individuals that maybe aren't the same types of people that Pete and Waits would engage with, and we encourage all of you guys to get all of your contacts and stuff involved in those public pieces of it.
How far out are we looking visionary-wise?
With the comprehensive plan, it's proposed to be a 15-year plan, 2040.
Okay, 2040.
Yes, so the taglines are Imagine Morganton 2040 Dream Plan Act. So right now, we're in the dreaming stage, and the planning stage, and then we shall act on it once the plan is adopted.
Would these be held at the community house as the other?
Some of them may be at the community house, some of them may be here. There may be other community venues that we choose for pop-up events to try to get that additional input from different types of groups of people. So we'll be advising particularly where those were. And for example, I know that one pop-up event will happen at the Morganton Festival, so out on the street as part of those events.
Thank you.
Mr. Wallace, when you made your motion, did you include that this is Mission 2030 Comprehensive Plan, that it was
That last line.
that last line?
Sure I did, you just didn't hear.
Of course. All right, anyone else have a topic or items for discussion tonight? Seeing no one jump up and get our attention, I will announce that the meeting is adjourned.